Thank you, Faith, and hello, everybody. It's nice to be back here with you today. What are we on the fourth of the 5 days? And the topic of this week is the 5 spiritual powers, more specifically, cultivating how to cultivate the 5 spiritual powers in your practice and by extension in your life. So, to review these 5 powers, on day one or Monday, we looked at the spiritual power of faith. Specifically, we spoke about 3 types of faith. Day two, or on Tuesday, we spoke about the spiritual power of effort, reclaiming the word effort in its healthy, wholesome aspects and how that applies to our practice. Yesterday, we spoke about mindfulness, our core transformative practice in Vipassana, in mindfulness-based meditation. Today, we're going to dive into the topic of concentration and see how concentration applies directly to our practice. Tomorrow, we will open up wisdom. And speaking of wisdom, the topic came up a few times yesterday, actually, in a few of the questions after our sitting practice. And then Faith was reflecting to me that maybe this would be actually a good topic to go into deeper. And I'm speaking about the 3 universal characteristics. And if you've been around mindfulness meditation, if you've been studying Vipassana meditation for a while, certainly if you've been on retreats, you will know that, or you will no doubt have heard mention the 3 universal characteristics. And even though today's topic is concentration, the 3 universal characteristics kind of falls into the category of wisdom, which we're going to speak about tomorrow. But without concentration, you can't really, without concentration, the eye of insight will not open. Without the eye of insight opening, you won't be able to see the 3 universal characteristics. And Vipassana meditation, mindfulness-based meditation, is often translated as insight meditation. Vipassana in English is insight. But if you look at the etymology of the word Vipassana, it's 2 parts. There's Vi and Passana. Passana comes from the word Anupassana, which is contemplation or the repeated observation. Contemplate the object that's under your observation. That's contemplation. It could be a thought. It could be philosophical as well, or it could be phenomenological. Anupassana, repeated contemplation. To hold and sustain that contemplation, we must have concentration. Vi in Vipassana means specifically the 3 universal characteristics, that these 3 characteristics are that all phenomena in the universe, physical, non-physical phenomena in the universe, is conditioned by these 3 dhammas, these 3 ultimate realities, that all things are impermanent, anicca, all things are unsatisfactory, dukkha. And by unsatisfactory, it means since it's impermanent, we can't really hold on to it ultimately. So ultimately, there's no satisfaction to be held on to permanently. That's why it's dukkha. And anatta, which is non-self, that all phenomena of the universe is ultimately comes, stays for a while, disappears, which means it's ultimately empty. There's no it's insubstantial. There's no self there. Now, after Faith kind of contacted me afterwards, said, hey, mate, this might be a good topic to go into in the day of practice. Actually, I might do a pivot. I was going to teach something else on the day of practice in July. I'll just do a quick plug here. It's July 22nd. I'll be offering a day of practice. And I think it's a great idea to shift the topic to the 3 universal characteristics. So in that day, July 22nd, it's going to be a deep dive into the 3 characteristics and how they apply to your practice. Today, we're going to touch on it a little bit. And we're going to touch on it through the lens of concentration. So first, concentration. There's so many things to say about concentration. Of course, we are doing mindfulness-based meditation, not concentration-based meditation in this meeting, in this gathering. Many Vipassana practitioners do both. Faith mentioned I'm from the Mahasi tradition. In the Mahasi tradition, it's a straight vipassana. There's no samatha, no concentration meditation until much, much later. And for the higher paths of attainment, then they shift you to concentration-based meditation. To be honest, I'm not so sure what Martin is doing. I'm going to have to ask him next time I talk to him, just because I'm not so familiar with all the different Thai traditions. I do know that in the Goenka Vipassana meditation, they work with concentration meditations from the very beginning, kind of a classical approach. You develop concentration and then you shift to mindfulness. That being said, what we're doing in this meeting is mindfulness-based meditation. However, concentration is absolutely necessary. So the concentration that I'm going to be talking about today is more of a vipassana samadhi, a vipassana type of concentration, rather than absorbing into an object. It's a whole other topic. And like I did with energetic effort, like I did with mindfulness, I'm going to also refer to Buddhist psychology, the Abhidhamma, the basic to define what concentration is. And again, what's so great about the Abhidhamma, Buddhist psychology, is it's not Western psychology. It's best not to confuse the two. In fact, it's probably a misnomer. Buddhist psychology is a phenomenological exploration of human consciousness. Great. So as concentration applies to human consciousness, phenomenologically, what's going on there? What is the characteristic of concentration? The characteristic of concentration is non-dispersal. Non-dispersal. Things do not spread out. Things do not disperse. Concentration is non-dispersal. If we're focusing on the breath, you have that moment where you're paying attention on the breath, paying attention to the breath or being mindful of the breath, and the mind slips over there with a thought, or maybe reflects to the past or plans for the future, or says to itself, am I doing this right? Those are all dispersed mindfulness. The mindfulness that is concentrated starts to slip away. This is completely normal in meditation practice. In fact, for a long time in a person's early stages, perhaps even the early years of your meditation practice, that's the main feature. It's really hard to stay with one experience, breath, for example, for more than just a few seconds. It's quite hard. Because the spiritual power of concentration has not yet been developed, or is not strengthened to a certain point, or the spiritual power of concentration is strengthened, but sustaining that concentration is quite difficult. That there's no longer stamina, that it has its peak. I can hold it together. Everything's really stable. The concentration's stable. And then, okay, wow, that's, towards the end of the 30 minutes or whatever you might be sitting, you kind of get started in the first few minutes, and then you find the mind is stable. You're able to pay attention to experience, without thinking too much. You're just stable there. And then after 15 minutes or after 20 minutes or after 25 minutes, it's like, okay, the mind is just, that's it for today. Genug is genug. That's kind of normal. Okay. But when the concentration starts to wane, or before the concentration is stable, it's dispersing. The mind is dispersing. So the characteristic of a concentration is non-dispersal, when the mind stays with the experience. Yeah, makes sense? And you can just relate this directly to your meditation practice. When we sit down and meditate, close our eyes, we turn in. Usually the first few moments, we're able to establish the attention on the breath, no problem, or whatever your primary object might be. It could be body scan, or it could be thoughts, mental formations. We sit down and we establish the mind on these experiences, and first few moments it's okay, and then wow, the mind is kind of all over the place. And that's okay, normal. After 5 minutes or 10 minutes where all that noise in the mind settles down, suddenly now the concentration is starting to collect. And that is the function of concentration. Concentration collects the mind. It collects the mind. And it's the same way that a magnifying glass, if you ever played with a magnifying glass as a child, these little glasses, lens, and you burn a piece of paper or something like that. It's a receipt. You burn a piece of paper. So you have to. You can't just put the glass on the paper and it's going to burn. It doesn't work that way. You have to hold the glass at the right distance from the paper. You have to hold the glass at the right angle to the sun. And you have to hold the glass for the right amount of time. Too little, it doesn't happen. When it reaches a critical mass of concentrated sun rays, it ignites the paper. The holding of distance and the holding of angle and the holding of the right amount of time, that's effort. That's our energetic effort we spoke about 3 days ago. The collection of the beams of light into one point, that's the concentration. So concentration is actually something we need to have in balance with our energetic effort. Last thing I'll say about concentration before we practice is that my teacher used to say that it was like a bow and arrow. Yeah. So when you pull a bow, like there's the pulling of the bow, right? Like imagine it's a strong bow and you pull it back. That's effort because it's like takes some exertion to do that. The holding of the arrow on target, you pull the bow and there's a lot of tension. It's like, oh my gosh, that's the effort. But the holding of the arrow on target, that's the concentration. And those two things need to find a balance. They need to be in balance. How do you bring those into balance? Mindfulness. You don't have to do a little bit more concentration, a little less effort, a little more effort, a little less concentration. Not necessary. If you find that there's an imbalance, just be mindful of that imbalance, and suddenly you'll find yourself back in balance. Concentration is a muscle. The power of concentration must be developed. Over time, it will be developed. Naturally, concentration develops in our mindfulness meditation. Every time we bring the mind back and pay attention to the breath, that's developing concentration. Every time we sustain the attention on the breath, for example, the breath, again, whatever method you might be using, but every time we sustain our attention on the breath in this moment, and in this moment, and in this moment, that's the development of the power of concentration. As you develop concentration, you'll begin to see the differentiation. Sorry, I just want to see how much I should say here. As you develop as the power of concentration develops with energetic effort and mindfulness, of course, you will start to enter the path. That's the penetrating insight. You'll enter the path of insight, the inner path of meditation, and you'll notice a differentiation between mind and matter. Of course, the mind and the body are connected, but you'll start to see the difference of, oh, this is like mind. Oh, this is like body. Yeah. And as the concentration allows you to penetrate deeper and see the deeper insight, you'll notice that their experiences are connected, that this thought leads to that thought leads to sweat on my forehead, if it's worry, sweat on the forehead leads to irritation leads to the desire to scratch, pain in my knee leads to worries in my mind. You'll start to see this whole cause and effect process. If you're already seeing that, just kind of remind yourself that is insight. That is insight. You are on the inner path of meditation. That is the eye of insight opening up. Then when you're able to be with an experience, and then we're going to practice now. When you're able to be with the experience, for example, the breath, from the beginning through the middle to the end. I mentioned this yesterday. Pause or no pause. If there's a short pause, what's the quality and characteristic of that pause? When you're right there with concentration, you'll see the beginning of the out breath, and you'll be able to know the qualities and characteristics, the specific physical sensations in the breath, in that out breath, all the way through the middle to the end. Notice how it ends. Notice if there's a pause or no pause, and what's the quality of the pause, if there's a pause. You'll be able to see the very beginning of the next breath. When you can see the full breath cycle, the full pause cycle, the full out breath cycle, etc., when you can see that, you've entered process-oriented consciousness. That's when the eye of insight opens up enough to be able to see anicca, dukkha, and anatta. You'll see directly, you'll start to have experiences of impermanence. Directly, you'll start to have experiences of unsatisfactoriness. Directly, you'll start to have experiences of non-self. And then from then on, these three universal characteristics just can. From then on, our experience, our understanding, our insight of these three universal characteristics continues to grow and mature. It's that growth and maturing of our insight into the three universal characteristics of anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Our maturity of accepting impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. That's the forward path in meditation. You must have energetic effort to go there, for that to unfold, I should say. Of course, mindfulness. None of this happens without mindfulness. It's the key. But we have to have concentration. The characteristic of concentration is non-dispersal. The function of concentration is to collect the mind. And finally, you may or may not experience this today. It depends really on your concentration. But the manifestation of concentration, the way it manifests in your practice, in your mind, in your body, in your heart, and in your life, is through peace and calmness. A concentrated mind is a peaceful mind. Why? Because there's no gaps. Nothing comes in. It's a calm mind because there's even agitated. The mind is somehow, in a way, protected. So once again, and this is something you can relate to in your practice, the characteristic of concentration is non-dispersal. The function of concentration is to collect the mind. And the way it manifests is through peace, calmness, and stillness. Okay? So let's practice. Finding a comfortable position, but not too comfortable. Remember, balance. Finding a straight posture, but not too rigid. Balance. Close your eyes. Allow your attention to turn in. And start with the gross. So just always, not always, but it's a good method to check in with the body first. And as you check in with the body, just notice the predominant sensations, and that's there. The mind usually goes there automatically. We don't have to do much. And then as you focus on those predominant sensations in the body, as you let those in, being mindful and sustaining that mindfulness with concentration, know the qualities and characteristics of those sensations. Notice if they're pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Notice if there's hardness or softness, or if it's dense or airy. Whatever the qualities and characteristics are, just knowing them. No preference, no agenda. Should you notice there's preference in the mind, I like this, I don't like that, perfectly normal. Then shift your attention to the mind, knowing the predominant experience in the mind. Right now, what is going on with our minds? Is the mind open? Is the mind contracted? Is the mind relaxed? Is the mind busy? Is it a thinking mind? Or do you have some sort of established observation of what's arising? Whatever the case, with no agenda and no manipulation, open and allow what's arising in the mind. And with differentiated awareness, observe, mindfully observe the quality and characteristic of the mind. And if you're able to sustain that observation for 1 moment, 2 moments, 3 moments, 4 moments, 5 moments, that can already be hard. But if you are, notice that those are moments of concentrated mindfulness. And in those moments, the concentration is stable. And when the concentration is stable, you will mindfully know the characteristics of the experience. And shifting your attention to the breath. Of course, if you have another method or technique that you usually do, feel free to do that. I'm going to speak about the breath as a general object. Shifting your mindfulness to the breath, and specifically the breath in the belly. And as you breathe in, notice the precise physical sensations in the movement of the belly. As you breathe out, noticing the precise physical sensations in the movement of the belly on the out breath. And as you notice the sensations through the breath process, the sensations in the movement of the in breath, the sensations in the movement of the out breath. See if you can notice how the in breath is coming to a stop. At some point, the in breath does end. It takes concentration. The mind must be collected. The magnifying glass of experience must be positioned in the right way to see the very end of the in breath. How is it ending? Suddenly, gradually, choppy, smooth, pleasant, unpleasant, etc. Knowing the characteristics of the breath through the end. And as you collect your mind on the experience, noticing if there's a pause or no pause at the end of the in breath. And if there's a pause, knowing the quality and characteristics of that pause. It takes a very subtle attention to be able to see if there's a pause or no pause. And if you don't see it, that's what you're seeing. That is the truth. Stay with that experience. Gradually, you will see more. And should you be able to see the end of the in breath or the pause, then noticing the very beginning of the out breath. How is it beginning? Suddenly, gradually, is it jumping? Is it smooth? Is it hard? Is it soft? Whatever the characteristics are there. What is the arising phenomena at the very beginning of the out breath? And when you're there to see the beginning, you can follow through the out breath to the middle, knowing all the little qualities, sensations, and characteristics of that movement. You can continue to observe through the middle all the way through to the end of the out breath, knowing the qualities and the characteristics of the out breath at the end. Hard, soft, smooth, choppy, rough, bouncy, wavy, steps, sections, vibrations, whatever is there. And then see if you can follow the out breath all the way to the very moment that it comes to an end. No manipulation, allowing the breath to be natural. Noticing if the breath is pleasant or unpleasant, with no preference. Noticing if the breath is loose or tight, with no preference, no manipulation. And should you be able to follow the breath to the very end, notice if there's a pause or no pause. What is the quality of that pause? And then mindfully knowing the very beginning of the next in breath, knowing its qualities and its characteristics. Should the mind slip off, no problem. This is part and parcel of our practice. And it is a fact for quite some time that there will be more slipping than there will be concentration. It's totally normal. Not a problem. The moment that you're aware the mind slipped away, simply, gently acknowledge wandering, bring it back to the breath or your primary object, whatever that anchor may be. Collecting the mind and mindfully knowing the qualities and characteristics of the breath. With each breath, in each moment, concentrated moment by concentrated moment, and breath by breath. Bringing your mindfulness back to the body. Feel the body. Bringing your mindfulness back to the breath. Feel the breath. Bringing your mindfulness to the mind and know your mental state. Is the mind busy? Is the mind quiet? Is the mind wandering, or is there mindfulness? Is the mind energized, or is it lethargic? Fully accepting whatever the state is, just knowing and knowing the qualities and characteristics. And being mindful of the space on the inside, mindfulness of your own interior. As you slowly open your eyes, coming out of the meditation, be mindful of the space on the outside and around you. And giving yourself a few moments to ease out of the meditation, bringing whatever level of mindfulness you've cultivated, bring whatever level of concentration, peace, and stillness you may have cultivated. So we have a period of 15 minutes, 14 minutes to address some questions or comments that you may have. But before doing that, I just want to remind everybody that, as you know, Song Alive is run on the Dana system, or these daily meditations are run on the Dana system. And any support that you can give would be greatly appreciated by Song Alive. It goes to support the operation because it's not a small thing, and also goes to support the staff and the teachers, which are all here. The operation, the staff, and teachers are here to support your practice. So, as they say in the Dhamma, support the Dhamma. We support the Dhamma. The Dhamma supports us. The Dhamma supports us. We support the Dhamma. Faith will post a link somewhere here in the chat if you're looking for the link. And yeah, of course, everything would be, any generosity would be greatly appreciated and returned. So if anybody has any questions or comments, or if anybody would like to come on screen, yeah, Faith just posted the donation link there. This is your chance. Remember, a core part, an integral part of our meditation practice is called Dharma discussion. That's when you meet with and ask questions to teachers. Ooh, two questions. Okay, first question from Clive. Hey, Clive. Nice to see you again. I noticed at the beginning of the meditation, you direct us to have the mind observe the mind. Okay. Then the mind to observe the breath. Okay. Can you say more about the observing of the mind, please? Okay. Well, actually, first, the body is, physicality is more gross than the mind. The mind is more subtle than physicality. So at the beginning, I say, okay, check in with the body. It's just a way to anchor the mindfulness in the present moment with the gross. Sometimes I'll direct us to moving into feelings, which is more subtle than the body. And from there, I'll direct you to observing the mind. And then, once we've kind of made that kind of check in, I bring us back to the breath. That's just my way of doing it. It doesn't have to be like that. When it comes to observing the mind, the mind is any type of formation that arises in consciousness. Thoughts, sensation, sorry, not sensations, thoughts, feelings of unpleasant, pleasant, and neutral, memories, internal dialogues, internal monologues, internal imaginations, internal images. Any of this stuff that arises in the mind is considered a mental formation and should be included in your mindfulness observation. There are four foundations of mindfulness. The third one is Chitta Nupassana, the contemplation of mental formations, the contemplation of the mind. So, yeah. And again, if I just connect it to the three universal characteristics, including the mind, whatever you observe in the mind, when the avaya of insight's open and you're able to sustain that attention, you'll see directly that it's impermanent. Advanced stages, they just dissolve away. Thoughts and images, they all dissolve away relatively quickly. And then you'll see the impermanent, you'll see the unsatisfactory nature, the grasping and clinging nature of our mental formations. And then you'll also see the emptiness when they disappear or pop like a little soap bubble. You'll see the anatta, the emptiness. Okay, Clive, I hope that was enough. Here's a question from B. After an operation, there is a lot of pain in the body. Okay. In the practice, I notice myself attempting to be present and soften. Okay, I guess you're saying, B, that you're after an operation and there's a lot of pain in your body. I'm assuming that's what you're saying. Then you say, in the practice, I notice myself attempting to be present and soften into those feelings of pain. Good for you. Then I notice a tensing and flinching, completely normal. Trying to be present with this and then trying to be present with this. Could you share your approach, further guidance when there is pain in the body and practicing? Thank you so much. Yeah, B, that's a great question. And it's completely related to concentration. So pain is pain is no fun. Some of us have a natural, some of you, because it's not me, some people have a natural tendency to turn towards the pain and observe the pain. Others of us, and this includes me, when pain arises, my natural tendency, if I'm not mindful, is to turn away from it. It's like, oh, I don't want this experience. It is good. It is a good practice to turn into the pain and observe the pain, because it's a very, very clear-cut object. It's a very, very clear-cut experience, and there's so much that you can see. There's so much you can learn from the pain, and eventually, some pains, like if you've had an operation, this will be temporary, but in some cases, pain can just disappear through penetrative insight. I won't go into too much about that, what that is right now, but if you have an injury or something, pain will come back. But the way that all that holding around the pain can dissolve. Here's the deal with pain. I highly recommend taking pain as an object when you have the stamina and capacity to do so. Don't burn yourself out on it. This is 100% related to the stability of your concentration. So when the mind is incredibly, like strongly concentrated, it can stay with the pain and really just be with the pain and nothing else. No matter, and here's the thing with pain. So much to say about pain, but usually when you observe, when we turn into the pain, what will happen is that pain will flare up in intensity. When we're fully present with this, the pain says, "Thank you for observing me. Here I go." And there's a wave of intensity. If you have concentrate, if the concentration is stable, you can sustain that wave of intensity, and that wave of intensity will also go down. It might go up and down and up and down, but it's all dependent on the ability to concentrate. If your concentration is unstable, or not so strong in that moment, then don't burn yourself out trying to observe the pain. Yeah. And in your case, B, when the concentration is stable, if you can ride those waves of intensity and really see into the deeper, deeper nature of pain, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to gain a lot. A lot of insight will arise. If not, then it's okay to shift to self care, stretch, change the posture, do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. When you're able to observe pain, here's what can happen. And you might know this, B, from your experience. First, at some point, the pain, when you have good concentration, if you're able to sustain the observation, pain will appear as a object in the mind. You'll be able to see it in the mind at the beginning. Then that object will go from a two-dimensional seeing of the experience to a three-dimensional. And then that three-dimensional experience might actually start to have contours and depth and mountains and valleys, and it could be fibrous. It could be a lot of different things going on there. And then if you're able to observe that, you're going to notice that it starts to change, that things start to change. That whole process, it takes concentration to be able to see that. But if that's what's happening in the practice, that's the inner path. Let it continue to happen. There's so much more I could say about that, but because of time, I want to get to these other two. And I guess the basic thing I'll say is that if you've got the concentration to ride the wave of intensity, do that. If you don't, self care. Okay. But remember that stability has to be built, developed, strengthened. Power of concentration. Nothing develops the power of concentration more than observing pain. Thanks, B, and good luck with everything. Okay, Katie says, Miles, how important is it to focus on the breath in the belly rather than, for example, the rise and the fall of the chest, which is where'd you go? Which is more obvious for you? Yeah, both are fine. Both are fine. Usually, when people kind of observe the breath, but in an undirected way, they kind of following the in and the out. It travels. That's okay. Anything can be an experience of vipassana. So whatever you're observing is good. What's good about the belly, is that it just anchors you deeper, and it's kind of, well, I guess if you're observing the chest, it's okay. I think it's the anchoring factor that makes the breath in the belly, an interesting experience. But the breath in the chest is completely fine. What's important is that you see the qualities and characteristics of that movement on the in breath. You see the qualities and characteristics of that movement on the out breath. If it's becoming more tight, know it's becoming more tight. If it's becoming more loose, know it's becoming more loose. Don't make any type of manipulation. Unless it's too intense and you need to do some deep breathing or some breath work, it's completely fine to do that, but then come back and let it be natural. Okay? All right. So it's fine. When observing my mind, it was a revelation to see what a state it was in, how I could release that state from a place of observation. Beautiful. Thank you, Jane. Nice reflection. Um, Sabina says, shouldn't every concentration need a point, a direction? There's an object of concentration. Yes. That's the answer. The answer is yes. You need to be concentrated on something. Now, if you're concentrating on the breath, what you're concentrating on is the movement of that something. And in the movement of the something, which is what's good about the breath, is there's moment to moment changes that you're observing. Moment to moment physical sensations and characters and qualities and characteristics that are changing moment to moment to moment. But there's the arc of the in breath, the pause, or the stop of that arc, the pause or no pause. There's the arc of the out, the beginning of the arc of the out breath. There's that arc, and there's a stop and a pause or no pause. So that's the point. If it's the mind, you're observing a thought or an image or whatever. That's the point of concentration. Not to be confused with concentration meditation, where you have a fixed point. Vipassana meditation, nothing's fixed. Why is nothing fixed? Anicca. It's all impermanent. You can't fix anything in Vipassana meditation. We're seeing the unfixed stated nature of reality. Okay, so what the point you're focusing on is always going to be in change. Patricia says differentiated awareness. Oh, good. I love differentiated awareness. That guidance on the characteristics of the experience does help to sustain concentration. It was good to see the movement of mindful concentration, allowing me to recognize wandering as a witness. Beautiful, beautiful. That was a good step forward for me. Thank you, Miles, for this direct seeing of experience. It's your direct seeing of experience, but you're welcome. Differentiated awareness. Now, what I mean by differentiated awareness in Burma, Vipassana, they always say detach and observe. Sometimes detach is a little bit like cold, detached from experience, and that's not what I mean. I basically mean to differentiate. So I'm identified as, I differentiate as the observer. There's the part of the mind that's mindful, and the experience that it's mindful of. That's differentiated awareness. Last one, Nicola. It's going to have to be quick. Can you say something about open awareness? Does one not have only one point of observation? Thank you. Well, it's like I said, there is no one point of observation in Vipassana meditation. Now, this comes around the third stage of insight knowledge. When you're seeing the direct experience of anicca, nothing is fixed. It's all open. It's not open. Nothing is fixed. It's all changing. The reason we have a technique of a fixed object like the breath is to anchor the mind. That's all. That's the only reason. Now, when you're advanced, you can still anchor the mind in the breath. You can stay with the breath the whole time. You can stay with the pain the whole time. It's good. And what will happen is your mind will just go infinitely deeper into subtlety. The experience will become more and more refined. Now, the mind is still free to openly observe, be mindful of whatever's arising experience. But when there's concentration, the mind doesn't need to go anywhere. It's free to go wherever it wants, but doesn't need to go wherever it wants. If you're just practicing open awareness, I would recommend trying to stay, for example, with the breath. Try it. Try it for 3 minutes. Try it for 5 minutes. Try it for 10 minutes. Try it for one whole sitting and see what happens. If there's a resistance to just staying with the breath, then something's going on there. And it's probably desire. It's probably a hindrance. Okay. So open awareness, let's say like the best of open awareness, you can be aware of everything that's arising, or you can choose to be aware of one thing that's arising. That's what openness means. Not to be attached to the one thing and not to be avoiding looking at one thing. Okay. That's it, everybody. So thank you for today. I hope this was beneficial kind of teaching for you, and I hope your practice is going well. Tomorrow we are going to look at the fifth and the final day, which is the universal characteristic. Sorry, which is the fifth power of the five spiritual powers, none other than the power of wisdom. May your practice continue to deepen. May your concentration be stable. When it falls apart, may you be able to let that fall apart. And through this process, may your practice continue to lead you forward, forever and always forward, developing the five spiritual powers in your practice and your life. Thank you, everybody.